Both my children are born in South Korea. So I think the key points that are different is it's all about efficiency. Birth has to be efficient.
Wow. Well, that's not encouraging at all.
We were being pushed for a cesarean for literally no reason.
For no reason at all.
Because you had an IVF baby, we want to make sure that you have the safest birth, which is a cesarean birth. So that's why
the safest kind of birth is a cesarean birth.
This doctor did, yes.
Wow.
They are now doing free cesareans starting this year.
So what opened your eyes to deciding to do it differently?
I had been reading my birth stories and I'm like, what is going on? Like, what? And people are kind of saying scary stuff. And I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't give birth in a hospital, like a traditional Korean setting hospital.
What were you finding?
Like, husbands weren't allowed to be in the rooms.
Really?
I know. So my husband heard that. And then as soon as we walked out of the doctor's office, he was like, all right, we're getting our papers, we're leaving.
So the system is not great.
I want the safest natural birth. Like we were made. God created our bodies. We're wonderfully, beautifully, perfectly made. I was born to do this, you know? So I want to do that. I want to listen to my body. I want to follow the rhythms of my body and just let it happen naturally without interventions. That was my mind.
Welcome to the podcast, ladies. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Cindy Park-Jun, and she today is telling us her birth story of delivering 2 babies in South Korea. Cindy is a Korean-American mom who lives in South Korea with her husband, and after navigating IVF pregnancy, she decided to birth in South Korea, where they were living at the time, in a completely different culture with a language she didn't fully know, and had just an incredible story and experience of how God showed up for her in her birth in a country with one of the highest cesarean and intervention rates in the world. So welcome to the show, Cindy.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to hear your story. I always love studying what birth is like in other cultures. And it's a great way to get perspective as an American woman, because sometimes I have a lot of criticisms on the U.S. birthing system, and for good reason. In other countries, it is actually far worse. And so it makes me so grateful sometimes to hear what birth is like in other cultures. And I think this is going to be such a eye-opening journey, podcast for many of our listeners here. And I would love to hear more about what are some of the main differences between birthing in South Korea and in America or the Western world?
Yes. So both my children are born in South Korea. So I haven't personally experienced birth in the States or, the Western world. But from what I know and what I've heard from my friends and what I see on, Instagram and what I've learned during the entire pregnancy process, I think the key points that are different between South Korea and America is that it's all about efficiency. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. But birth has to be efficient. It needs to be on time. It needs to happen in this way. It needs to So one of the reasons that cesarean is so high is, yes, there are a lot of interventions, but within Korean culture also, there's a little bit of shamanism rooted. And some families believe that if a baby's born at a certain time and a certain date, they're going to be prosperous for life. So they'll choose to have an elective cesarean at a certain day, certain time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What is the cesarean rate in South Korea?
I don't know, but when I Googled it, it was like 7th in the world.
Oh.
But so I think it's in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, when I look it up right now, it says it's around 60% of births are delivered via cesarean in South Korea, which is really high.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, the U.S. cesarean rate is 30%.
Yeah.
So double what we have here. That's quite a lot. You have to do a lot of interventions to get a cesarean rate.
And actually, yes, and birth rate is the lowest in the world. Oh. And so for the government to combat that, they are now doing free cesareans starting this year.
Really?
Yeah.
So interesting. Like, okay, we'll
Right?
cover it. It's
Yeah.
free. We'll
Okay.
we'll
Yeah.
we'll like
Hmm.
do it for free if you just have
Yeah.
babies. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot of. Yeah. It's yeah. I yeah.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Then you tell us all the things. So
Yeah. So.
you did you know this going into this when you planned to have when you chose to live there and have babies there
No, I didn't. Honestly didn't. But I knew nothing about birth or anything like that until I got pregnant.
until you got pregnant? And yeah,
Yes.
and that's when we all seem to learn. That's when we'll
Yes.
learn, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, there's so much lack of education in that field. So honestly, after I've given, birth to my children, I told my husband, I was like, if I could see blood, I would totally be a doula. Like I'm like an advocate for like having a positive birth experience. I do believe that's a basic human right. As a woman, like we should be able to we should have access to that. But it's so hard to get access to that, especially in South Korea. You basically have to pay for the kind of birth you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's like that here too, to really get the birth you want. I mean,
Yeah.
midwives and home births are obviously much cheaper than hospital birth, but many women are have to pay out of pocket
Mhm.
and where their insurance company won't cover home birth, but they will cover a $50,000 hospital birth
Home
without
birth.
batting an eye. So
Mhm.
the system is not great, obviously.
Mhm.
And so what was your mentality going into birth different, having been raised in the US and then moving to South Korea? Was your mentality about birth different than other South Korean women that you met or knew there?
I think uh, before I started like really getting into the like learning about birth, I think it was the same. Like literally, what's the scene? The scene from Knocked Up, screaming. Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I imagined. I was
What most
like,
of us.
yeah, I was like, oh yeah, epidural all the way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Like, um, I think that's what everyone thinks,
Yeah.
before, and that's yeah.
So
I
what
was
opened your eyes to deciding to do it differently?
I think when we were going to a regular women's hospital, like a regular gigantic like OB hospital, it's just only a women's hospital, and when we were being pushed for a cesarean for literally no reason, really, and just really just degrading meat, um,
How far along were you with that they were suggesting cesarean?
28 weeks.
For no reason at all.
For IV because we had an IV, we got pregnant through IVF, and so they were like, you need to have an IVF because you had an IVF baby. We want to make sure that you have the safest birth, which is a cesarean birth. So
They
that's
think
why
that the safest kind of birth is a cesarean birth.
this doctor did. Yes,
Wow.
yes, yes. So
So
there are other doctors who advocate for vaginal birth, and like there are doctors who do advocate for that. But then this doctor that I had experience with was pushing for cesarean at 28 weeks because we had an IVF baby, and the safest birth is a cesarean. And she told me that first time moms downplay vaginal births and they don't realize how painful it is and they can't do it.
wow. Well, that's not encouraging at all.
I know. So my husband heard that, and then as soon as we walked out of the doctor's office, he was like, "All right, we're getting our papers, we're leaving." So we got our documents that day, and we're like, we left.
Yay. Good job, husband.
Yeah.
I just want to pause for a second. There's a lot of static. I think it's from your hair hitting the
Oh,
mic,
shoot.
perhaps. So if you want,
Yeah.
if you just put it behind your ear, even that might help.
Okay. I'll just do that.
Okay, yeah, I think that's better.
Okay.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Mhm.
So we'll just edit that out. Where were we? So your husband, yeah. So your husband said, "Okay, we're out of here." Where did you decide to birth after that?
So, before that, I was in a Facebook group with all the expat moms in South Korea, and I had been reading about birth stories, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, what? And people are like, kind of saying scary stuff, and I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't give birth in a hospital, like a traditional Korean setting
What
hospital.
were you finding?
Like, husbands weren't allowed to be in the rooms.
Really?
Yeah, no moving at all.
Like you're just laying
Yeah,
Still on it.
on your back. Like they don't let you move at all. No water, no food, no nothing. Epidurals are different here. The drug is much weaker than the US. So a lot of the moms said that it's not even worth it. I
Wow.
don't know. Some say it's worth it and some say it doesn't because epidurals doesn't they don't work on everyone. So
Yeah, and they're all
um
different depending on your
yes.
anesthesiologist.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they were like, it's not worth it. Like husband's not allowed. You don't really have a say. They just kind of tell you what to do. And they just I don't know if they do that in the US, but in Korea, they basically prep you, even if you're having a vaginal birth, they prep you beforehand for a cesarean just in case.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. They used to do that in the US. It's better now. You said they cut you. Were you saying they do episiotomies
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's routine.
on everyone?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Yeah, you guys are like 20 to 40, 30 to 40 years behind
Yes.
the US
Yes.
in
So
terms of advancement.
it's yes. So Korea is technologically very far advanced. Like if you ever visit Korea, you'll be like, wow, this country is so everything's touchscreen and everything's like so technologically advanced. Like, wow. But
Yeah.
when it
And you were
comes
saying
to
like skincare is like
Mhm.
like the envy of the world. Everyone goes to
Yes,
South Korea for
dermatology, plastic
skincare
surgery,
advancements.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But
But
when it comes to women's health, it's like,
you're in the
yeah,
dark
it's really,
ages.
yeah. Because
You're
our
still doing
birth,
episiotomies on every woman. That is out of date for sure.
yes. And my birth center doctor, like the guy who started it, he used to be just like a regular doctor, like a regular just OB, but then he did a sabbatical at Duke or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And then that's when he first saw a natural birth. And
Wow.
that's when he
As
first
an
like
OB, that he had never seen a natural birth.
like
Wow.
how it's done like in the States, like in the pool, like in with water and like
Yeah.
tranquility, like things. He's probably seen natural births, because but not like
Oh,
in
but
that
like in that
setting.
kind of environment.
Yes.
Yes. Wow. So that
So
opened his eyes.
yes, it did. So that's how he started this birth center, and he like wrote multiple books and things like that. And there, uh, then he, in order to give natural birth there, you had to take natural birth classes.
Mm.
And he kind of started the first class he started, and he like, gave us the history of like the OBGYNs in South Korea. And before the Korean War, everybody was having babies at home, having natural
Mhm.
birth, and they were midwives. But then after the war, it was introduced through UNICEF or UN or something. And then that practice that came in 1953 is still the exact same as
It's
basically what he was saying.
yeah, and it's not too far off from the US. Like before the 60s, mothers were giving birth at homes predominantly. And then by like when the introduction of continuous electronic fetal monitoring, believe it was in the 50s, there was a huge push to go to the hospitals and they demonized the midwives, saying, oh, well, they're just like these granny midwives. They don't know what they're doing. It's safer in the hospitals. So that we're going to have male doctors attending you. We're going to monitor you. We're going to lay you on your back.
Back.
And it was like a massive shift. And
Yeah.
so but it sounds like you sense that you guys haven't advanced much at all in terms of the standard care and practices.
Yes.
Um, unfortunately. And so you showed me a video of a typical birth in South Korea. Can you explain what that is? I'll link it below you guys, but it is wild. Can you
Yeah.
help us for our listeners, help us understand like
Yes.
what is a typical birth like?
Yes. Um, I I just want to say that take what I say with a grain of salt because I'm only one person, and my experience is very limited. But from what I know, this is fairly common. Not for everyone, but fairly common. Is that what happened? What I sent you in one reel was a husband was there's a guy standing behind like a divider, like a
Yeah.
sheet divider, and he's like, "Okay, 1, 2, 3, breathe. You're doing a great job." That's the husband, and he can't touch his wife.
Yeah, so he's
And
standing back, like 10 feet
yes,
from the mother, and the
yeah,
mother's on a metal kind of very
hospital
small
bed thing,
hospital
yeah.
bed that,
Hmm.
and then there's a
And then there's a
drape,
nurse, yeah,
a nurse.
and then there's a nurse on top of her who's pushing down her stomach as she's pushing, and the mom is flat on her back with her legs up.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And is that's common? Like they push on your belly while you're pushing?
And in the comments, the when she shared that, it was in a positive light. Like, I gave birth vaginally. Like, I did it thanks to my husband. Like, it was like that.
Because yeah,
That
they were
was,
coaching her pretty
hmm
rigorously.
yes. And when I did tell another mom about how I think Korean births are very traumatic for the woman, the mom was just kind of like staring at me, like kind of dumbfounded. And she was like, you know what? We don't think it's traumatic because we don't know anything different. Like,
Yeah,
why
wow.
would we think
That's
that?
their normal.
Yeah, that's certain. Like, we don't think it's traumatic because
Yeah.
like, we don't know any better, basically. And I was like, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Like that is so sad. In
Yeah.
this time and age where there's TikTok and Reels and YouTube, like everybody has access to this, but like because they haven't been exposed to it, why would you go looking for it if you've never been exposed to it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. Like I tell women with that switch, even from OBs to midwives, like you don't know how good it is. Like you don't know how well you deserve to be treated
Hmm.
and what you don't have to experience. And yet I think so many women have, I don't know if I don't want to call it necessarily Stockholm syndrome, but it's like because of the fear and the mentality surrounding birth in general, it's like we
Yeah.
go to a hospital, we have them do all these interventions or interfere with the natural labor process, thinking it's necessary. And then we come out the other side, like thankful and grateful that they saved our baby because, oh my
Exactly.
gosh, thank God we're in the hospital. The cord is wrapped
Hmm.
around baby's head, or
Hmm.
they had to
Hmm.
induce me, or I got stuck, baby got stuck, and I got stalled, and they had to give me Pitocin. It's like, did they really have to? Or was that
Hmm.
like just it naturally you had issues because you were in a setting where they weren't really treating you well, where your body wasn't functioning optimally because the physiology was being disrupted. But we think they saved the day and that, or in this woman's case, like I had a vaginal birth, like that's the standard. And statistically, she is the minority that
Hmm.
she had a vaginal birth. But
Hmm.
I agree with you. That makes my heart break that they think that that's normal, or that this is somehow like what's necessary or required in order to have a
Hmm.
vaginal or positive
Hmm.
birth. I mean, thankfully it is positive in her mind, but there's so much more out there. There's so much,
Hmm.
there's other ways to do it.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of what birth education helps women with is really
Yes.
understanding that they have so many other options. And if you don't know your options, Penny Simpkins says, if you don't know your options, you don't have any.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, so birth here, most moms, I mean, not most, but I know like on the top of my head, just a few moms that I know that did the traditional Korean route and they were in labor for like 40 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like, so did their friend. Like, so it's like,
Yeah, it's
oh,
just how it's done.
yeah.
And they're pushing on mom's belly while she's pushing. You said one woman had like bruises
Yeah.
from
Hmm.
this. Like
Hmm.
I can't even like knowing what I know about like birthing physiology. I cannot imagine that is helpful in any
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, maybe if it's like at the very end and baby's stuck, I suppose that could potentially
Help.
help if there's a little bit of pressure put
Yeah.
there, but to do that for so
Yeah.
long
Hmm.
would be traumatic for me.
Yes. And, like forceps are still being used here and vacuums and things like that.
Like a standard or in an emergency.
Not standard, but probably more often than we think.
Yeah, more
Um,
often than not.
yeah. So,
Gosh. So what was your birth experience like? You've had two babies there now. You chose
mhm.
to go to this birthing center. How was that experience for you? Tell us about it.
Well, it was night and day compared to my previous hospital. And then when we moved there, we moved to that hospital because um, there's an English speaking midwife, and it was one of the birth centers recommended by the moms in the Facebook group. So there's like 3 main birth centers in Seoul. That's it. So, and the 2 other ones were too far for me. So we chose the closest one to us, which is about an hour away. And when we
Is home
went,
birth a thing there? Do women have
it
births at
is,
home?
it's very rare, but it is.
So probably not a lot of home birth midwives are even available.
So now these women, now midwives and doulas are kind of on a rise right now.
Okay.
I think mainly because a celebrity had a home birth, I think. And she like documented the entire process.
Wow.
I watched it as well. And I think it kind of glamorized birth a little bit, which I appreciate. And
Glamorized or showed a different perspective or option, perhaps.
both.
Both. Okay.
I watched it and it was so beautiful. I was like, oh, like I want to have a birth like that. Like not she was beautiful or any. I mean, she is beautiful, but like the entire process was just very just like spiritual and like they had worship music playing. Her kids were there, and then her parents came, and like the midwives were there, and she was in the pool, and like what a home birth what I would have imagined back home, kind of around that, and I thought it was very sweet. So I like sent it to my mother-in-law, I sent it to my mom. I was like, isn't this so beautiful?
That's amazing that she can shift culture like that. That just like having images and a picture of a celebrity giving birth at home in South Korea will promote the rise in home births and doulas and midwives. I think that is kind of a lot of these shifts happen in the culture first.
Yes.
And
so now there is
interesting thing.
Yeah, and there a lot of doulas here there are Korean doulas, and there's also a handful of foreign doulas as well. So the doula, if you know that doulas exist, you can find them.
Yeah.
Like it's not impossible.
So you kind of have to know what you want and really seek after it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you chose to go to this birth center, and what was that like? Did you have to advocate for what you wanted, and how was your birth?
My first one, I had 2 natural births. I highly recommend it, and they were awesome. Like, yeah, and
so you had no epidural, meaning like all natural. I don't know what the epidural rate is, but if your cesarean rate in South Korea is 60%, I imagine your epidural rate is near 100.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say 99.9.
Wow. So that's a big thing to say I had a natural birth in South Korea.
Yeah, yes, I told my husband, I was like, I went to school, I have my master's degree, I've done a lot, I've traveled the world, but my biggest accomplishment in my life so far is having 2 babies naturally. Like that is my biggest accomplishment in life.
Yes, girl,
Yeah. So, yeah, when we went there, they were like, you guys have to take a natural birth class. And one of the things that I really loved is that they advocated the husband be the doula. They were like, your husband is your like is the closest person to you in that room when you give birth, the person that you can lean on the most, and they should be able to support you the most. So my husband took like 3 or 4 doula classes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they really encourage him to be involved, which is counterculture to like the norm in South Korea, where they're often
usually not even. Yeah.
Ah, wow.
Yeah. So my husband like really took that seriously and was like sitting in the front, raising his hand, like. Yeah, he took his job very seriously.
Was he supportive in labor too?
Oh yeah. So I say we gave birth, not I gave birth, because I couldn't have done it without him. Like he was my doula.
Was he very hands-on? Like, did he help you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Massages, pressure points, like everything.
Oh, awesome. That's so cool. Sounds like a good childbirth education that you guys both got there.
Yes. And he's like the alien out of his like group of friends, because like his friends like didn't even go into the room. They only just cut the umbilical cord, and they were like, you women, like you were there? You saw her? Like, 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 yeah, he's like, yeah.
It's awesome. You should do it, you. Want to be there for the birth.
That sounds so scary.
I do have to say, like, a lot of men now are stepping up and really wanting
Mhm.
to be involved and
Mhm.
supportive and participate, which I
Mhm.
love to see. And good for
Yeah.
him for sharing that. What
Mhm.
was labor like for you?
So my labors are quick. My first was 5 hours in total, and
Wow.
then my second was 2.5 hours.
Oh, that is fast.
So yeah, so if I have a third baby, if God blesses us for the third baby, I'm gonna have to have a home birth because
Like, let them
I ain't making a
You're gonna need it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
highly recommender.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. My husband and I talked about it. I was like, if we because we're moving to the States next month,
Oh,
and
wow.
if miraculously we get pregnant with our third
Where are you
baby,
moving?
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
too far from me. I'm in
yeah,
Charlotte.
yeah.
Any Atlanta, yeah, Atlanta moms who know good midwives and doulas, send us it, Cindy,
Yeah.
your recommendation.
Yes, please. Yeah. So yeah, third one possibly a home birth. Yeah.
Oh,
But
beautiful.
first one, I didn't know I was in labor. I might have been in labor for a while. When people are like, I was in labor for 12 hours, I'm like, how do you know? Like, do you count like the moment you got to the hospital and then to the time you had a baby? Or from the time that your first contraction happened to the baby came?
Usually it's like when contractions become consistent because it's
Mm.
sometimes hard to tell between like, are these contractions or are these Braxton Hicks? Because you could
Exactly.
be having Braxton Hicks for weeks on and
Yeah.
off. And it makes it kind of like a gray area. Like, I'm not sure exactly when to start that clock of like, oh, labor began here.
Yeah,
And it's
right?
not, we always, it's like birth is not linear. It's not like a
Yeah.
clear
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
line of
Mhm.
demarcation, like here's where we start the clock out and
Mhm.
here's where the second stage started or here's where active labor started. But
Yeah.
I would say like whenever they become consistent and timeable, like you
Mhm.
can rely on them
Mhm.
coming consistently on a set amount of intervals, that's usually a good indicator you're in labor. Now that could be very early labor, it could be every 20 minutes,
Mhm.
but if they're consistently every 20 minutes, you're in early labor.
Mhm.
Active labor is usually when they're 3 to 5 minutes apart. But of
Exactly.
course, that's like, there's always exceptions and outliers to
Yes.
that rule.
I know, right? Yeah. It, we took so many classes and I watched so many YouTube videos. I watched so many Instagram reels. I tried to educate myself as much as possible. But then when it happened, it was like, it was not linear at all. It was like, boom, boom, bing, bang, bing, dang, boom. Yeah. So,
No, it's true. And sometimes everything you know in your brain goes out the window.
yes. I was like, okay, breathe. Okay, I can't purple push. I can't purple push. I can't. But in the moment, you're like, I'm purple pushing. Next contraction, concentrate, concentrate. Like, so much
Well,
thinking.
yeah. What were some tools that helped you the most?
So I tried the comb method. That didn't help me. The water is the best. That helps me the best. And my husband did the hip pressure points, the
Yes.
hip
Hip
squeezes.
squeeze. Yeah.
Those were amazing.
Yeah. Make sure
When
your
I
partner knows how to do a hip squeeze,
Yes,
ladies.
seriously.
Practice.
You know those reels where they're like lifting up the dumbbell and they're like practicing for fatherhood, and then they pick up the baby. Like my husband was so funny. Like before we gave birth, he was like at the gym, like doing these arm curls. And he's like prepping for hip squeezes, like like things
Really
like
is
that. Yeah,
like
it was a joke. It was a joke, but
like,
yeah,
I took that seriously. The
yeah,
birth support and role. I love it.
yeah.
But
But
honestly, it's real. Like you get sore for doing hip
my
squeezes for hours.
my husband and I the next day after our first son, because he was like he woke up and he was like, I'm sore. Like his arms were sore from like holding me up and like doing hip squeezes. So yeah, you do get sore. My husband and I the next day we're both sore. So yeah, when we did the birth, my first with my son, I think I was in like early stages of labor, but wasn't sure if it's contractions or Braxton Hicks. And we went golfing. And like I was like, maybe we should time this. And I started timing it, and then the app's like, go to the hospital now. And we were like, nah, no way. So we just like continued on playing. We went to dinner and then we went for a walk, a long walk. This is 39 plus 6 days. So it was a day before my due date with my first son. And then I text my midwife, like, and I've been having bloody show for a couple days, but my midwife was like, "Oh, I think you're losing your mucus plug, but if no other signs, labor isn't immediate." So I was like, "Okay." And so I went to sleep, and then I woke up around like 12:30, and I was like, "Oh, my stomach kind of feels, oh, it feels tight. Like it feels like really strong period cramps." I woke up my husband, and we're like moving because my midwife was like, "Take a warm bath and do some yoga ball moves and see where you're at." It kept progressing. So she's like, "All right, come on in." So we got there around like 2:30, and I was 5 centimeters dilated. And I was like, and I was kind of worried because we live an hour away from the birth center. And they said if we're not open, like if I'm not dilated enough, they're gonna send us back home. So I was like, "Oh, I hope I'm dilated enough." But at this point, the contractions weren't that bad. I was like, "Oh, like I can," like I was laughing and talking throughout the car ride. And then I got there 5 centimeters dilated, and then that was 2:30. Yeah, around 2:30, 3 a.m. maybe. And then that's when it just went ba-boom. And then my son was out he was born at 5:56
Oh, wow.
a.m.
So you had your labor ramped up there in the middle of the
Yes. Yes. Really fast. So at first I was like, it moved so fast that I literally lost all focus. Like everything that I trained for, everything that I learned, I was like, and my husband was like sweating because he's like, like helping me with all these moves. And because and we were told that, first time moms, like labor's usually 12 to 24 hours, bring snacks, like bring like coconut water to stay, like electrolytes to stay hydrated. So we like had this whole bag of snacks. And I'm thinking I'm gonna like drink from my Stanley cup and have a snack and then no, we were like there, baby. So that's what it felt like.
Comic strip, like, oh.
Yeah. And then baby was there, and we were like, "Wow, I did that."
Yeah.
Whoa, like, whoa, I did that. Like, that's what it felt like.
Oh, I love it. Well, how long were you pushing for?
Oh, I remember I saw the clock at 5. I pushed for 56 minutes exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you were trying not to purple push at
I was
the time.
trying not to, so I was pushing a lot, and we tried the tub. No, we tried the birth stool. I was pushing on the birth stool, and then we went in the tub, and that was so relaxing. That helped a lot. And then this is why I call it the hybrid birth center, because there are still interventions.
Yeah.
And but it's not like I was like I didn't have like any fetal monitoring, or like I wasn't strapped to anything. I was free.
You had freedom of movement, which is a huge difference compared to being laying on your back on a hospital gurney.
Yes.
The video you showed me, like,
yes.
Totally different world.
Yes, and my birth center didn't even have a hospital bed. They had a king size bed, and the tub. Yeah.
Bed. Oh.
Yes. So it was nice, and then
did at any point where you like, I need an epidural, I need to go to the hospital?
Mm-mm.
No, I love it.
I literally blocked those words out of my mind. They didn't exist. I was like, I trained myself, like even with my husband, I was like, epidurals are not an option, and I'm very stubborn for like no reason. So I was very adamant about no epidural, no interventions whatsoever. But as I was pushing, my midwife was like, "Okay, mom, just gonna let you know that I think you're gonna tear bad."
Ooh.
I don't know if they can tell that, but she was like, "I think you're gonna have a really bad tear. We could either just let you tear naturally, or we can have an episiotomy. Either way, baby's gonna come out. It's up to you." And I was like, "Okay." But at this point, I was not pushing well, and I thought like my butthole was gone at this point. So I was like, I looked at my husband, I was like, "I don't want to say goodbye to my butthole forever." So I chose to have an episiotomy, but I don't regret it. because the doctor who did it, I don't, he was an on-call doctor. My regular OB wasn't in. He did a fantastic job. I have no idea where I had an episiotomy. I still don't know where. He said that he cut it like somewhere, but I don't know where it is.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
It's
so I mean,
interesting that they still offered that because what we know now from evidence is that when we give an episiotomy preventatively,
more.
you actually tear more.
Yeah,
And a natural tear is actually better and it heals faster.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes that thinking filters down even into like the natural birth centers and the midwifery
Exactly.
practice.
Yes, it does.
But I'm
So
glad it wasn't a terrible experience for you.
yeah, it was actually like totally fine. I had a fast recovery. I was totally
Good.
yeah, because I was like, I read all of that, like
Yeah.
leading to longer recoveries. You might tear more, da, 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 da. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. But at that point, I was like, it was like I was probably like 50 minutes into pushing, and I was physically exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think that at that point, that was my tap out point. And I was like, all right, let's just do it. And then they moved me to the bed. It was like, lights on, baby's out.
So they
Yeah.
moved you like from the tub to the bed and the baby came
Yes.
right out. That position change can really be beneficial, I think, for shifting that baby down and out, especially when you move from like, I don't know if you were reclining or like more leaning back in the tub, but like to go have to shift your whole body to like
Yes.
on the bed
Yeah.
is really seems to like
Mm-hmm.
help those babies just slide out better.
Yes.
And
And from the and from the tub to the bed is probably like a 3 feet walk, but that was the longest walk of my life. I was like in between contractions, and I was like, oh,
yeah, you don't want to move when beneath that low in their brain. It's like impossible.
Yeah.
But it probably actually really helped that baby come out.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And what was postpartum like for you?
Postpartum. So in Korea, it's like not even norm. It's just the way things are done is that you go to a postpartum care center and you're there for 2 to 3 weeks or even up to 4 weeks, I think. And it's all about, recovery for the mom, resting for the mom, and healing for the mom. So there's like mom yoga class and massages and like all kinds of, really awesome things really to help with recovery. But I chose not to go because you tend to be separated with your baby a lot, and the baby spends time in the nursery a lot, so that's gonna impact breastfeeding and this is my own take on it, but I also think going to these places contributes to postpartum depression because during those 2 weeks at post birth, babies usually are sleeping, right? And so these moms are like, oh my gosh, my baby's an angel. All they do is sleep whenever they go see their baby or the baby's brought to their room. And then when they go home by week 3 or week 4, baby wakes up and is crying all the time. And they're like, what happened to my sleeping baby? Like, why? Why is this happening? And they just cry. And it's so difficult.
Well, especially if they're being separated from their baby like that, their hormones are not going to balance. And that's going to contribute to postpartum depression.
Yes. And another norm in traditional Korean birth setting is that after the baby's born, they're just pretty much separated from you. I know some moms who didn't see their baby for like 3 days post birth.
Not because they had to go to the NICU,
just because, yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And what are they doing? Like they did that in the US in the 50s. They would separate the baby. They'd do all these observation and testing and mom would rest. And then it would be 2 or 3 days later and mom would hold the baby. But then by then it's like you're a stranger. Like it's like that golden hour, that window of time of bonding is so important. And if we don't keep mom and baby together, it can have, I believe, detrimental effects on mom's mental health and on baby's mental health. We just don't know it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I completely agree. So yeah, that's the norm. Mm-hmm. So breastfeeding is like not common. It's the formula is fed, formula pushed. Like even at the birth center, both my kids had got formula when they were taken up for testing. They got formula during that time, even though we said no formula.
Wow.
And like even if it's a birth center, like this is my birth center. I know some birth centers that are a little bit more natural minded and really support breastfeeding. Mine kind of lacked that a little bit. And I didn't know with my first, so I struggled a lot with breastfeeding.
Mm.
And that was so hard. I thought breastfeeding was harder than giving birth.
Wow.
Hmm.
And did they separate the baby? Did they take the baby after the birth?
Thankful, no, only just for testing. Oh, and actually, even though they do take away the baby, but we chose to keep the baby in room.
Mm.
So
Wow.
we
Even in a birth
keep that.
center,
Yes.
that's wild to me that like it's standard to take the baby and put them in the
Hmm.
nursery rather than being in your room with you.
Hmm.
Even in hospitals now, it used to be standard that they would take the baby and put them in a nursery. Like you see these sitcoms or like, TV shows where all these parents are looking through the glass screen
Hmm.
at these like dozens of babies in bassinets, right? Like it used to be like that. And now that's not how it is anymore. Like we know enough about skin to skin contact and how important that is that most hospitals in the US, it is standard to room the baby in with mom in mom's room. So there is a bassinet by the mom's bed and they stay for maybe 24 hours, 48 hours after birth and then get sent home. Unless of course baby has to go to the NICU, which is different, but standard is keep mom and baby together even in hospitals. So
Hmm.
it's so odd to me that standard in your birth centers there even is to separate mom and baby and put baby in the nursery.
Hmm. Yeah, I did that was my birth center. I think there's two other ones that don't separate you,
Yeah.
but they were too far for us.
It's so
I
in
definitely had our baby.
Yeah, we don't that's not the best that's not the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me how maternity care practices change so slowly. And
Hmm.
like here in the US, there's a delay between when evidence and research is done and when hospital actually change their standards and processes. And it takes about 18 years. But if we're looking 18 years, yeah, and that's in the US. But if we're looking at South Korea based on what you're describing, you guys have like a 50-year plus
Hmm.
delay because the evidence on skin to skin has been out for decades.
Hmm.
Right. The evidence on not doing episiotomies as routine care has been out for decades. And yet it's still being done as standard process there. So it just shows like how bizarre of a world that we live in that some industries are so advanced. Like you said, like your skincare industry is so advanced or your technology. And yet with maternity care and women's health, we're so far behind.
Hmm. Yeah, thankfully we did get skin to skin. We did golden hour with their kids,
Yeah.
and birth centers do have that option. I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of foreign moms go to birth centers.
Yeah.
Um, we get the golden hour, delay cord clamping, and all that.
Yeah.
So thankfully we were able to do all that, but I know not all Korean moms have access to that.
Yeah. And even when you say like they took the baby for testing, like nowadays, we advocate for them to do all the testing right there with baby on mom's chest or like right next
That's
to mom.
awesome.
Yeah. And that's standard for home birth. And it's standard for in hospitals, what they'll do is they'll give the mom the golden hour here in the US, and then maybe an hour or two later at some point, but there's hopefully no rush to this. The nurse will take the baby to the bassinet just a few feet away from mom and do, the different mobility tests and do the fetal exam. But that can be done with right on mom's chest with the baby in the bed. I think for convenience, they do it in the same room, but there's no reason if mom and baby are both healthy, and this is just for anybody listening, like this is so important to know. There's absolutely no reason for you and your baby to be separated after birth if baby is stable and mom is stable and healthy. No reason at all. All those exams can be done in the room with baby on your chest or in a bassinet next to your bed. And we should not be separating moms and babies. I think that's honestly one of the most detrimental things in maternity care that we've done in the history of maternity care, just for the psychological impact it has on mothers and babies.
I agree.
So I'm glad to hear you got the golden hour and that
Mhm.
you advocated for these things, because it's got to be hard to advocate in a country where it's so against the grain to do some of the things you wanted to do.
Yeah. So thankfully, the birth center gave us a birth plan checklist, and you can write all that in, and they
Yeah.
put it on your door,
I,
and then they can kind of
that's
follow
great.
that.
I love that. That's so cool. Like, here's what this mom wants for everyone
Yeah.
walking in the room. Here's what we're going to follow. And it's
Hmm.
not like, oh, we're going to write up our own birth plan and give it to you and hope you listen to it, hope you even read it. I think a lot of moms have that fear. It's like they
Hmm.
put all this work into creating a birth plan, and the hospital staff kind of just like look at it and go, yeah, we'll see if that happens.
Hmm.
That's kind of the attitude sometimes.
Yeah.
But the fact that your birth center encouraged it and put it right on the door, I love that.
Yeah. They're like, okay, on here, like they gave you a what to bring list and your birth plan is on that list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
What was your second birth like? How was it different? Or did you?
oh, it was so my first birth was so fast that we were kind of like, whoa, what's this happen? My second birth, everyone was like, oh my gosh, second baby comes out faster. And at this time I have like an 18-month old, 20-month old, and I'm heavily pregnant. And I'm like, oh man, that'd be awesome if the baby comes out early. Like, that's great. Well, she came after her due date.
Just to mess
So,
with you.
yeah.
Now, I'm
And
curious, were your friends like, did they think you guys were crazy for doing things differently?
my Korean friends,
Yeah.
of course, yes. And we pay like 4 times more
Really?
to have a
To
natural birth.
have a natural birth. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Instead
it's
of just
the
the
more
plastic.
expensive option and in their eyes, more painful. And
Yeah, they're like, why would you like you have all these options to like get a epidural, like why would you like put yourself through so much hardship and torture and But I'm like, this isn't torture. This I'm getting a trophy like, like you don't deserve a trophy for having a natural birth. Oh yes, I do. I deserve a trophy. Like, like and like for myself and for my babies too. I want the safest natural birth. Like we were made. God created our bodies. We're wonderfully, beautifully, perfectly made. I was born to do this, you know?
yes.
So I want to do that. I want to listen to my body. I want to follow the rhythms of my body and just let it happen naturally without interventions. That was my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. You're absolutely right because the safest birth is the most natural way to birth, which is
Mm-hmm.
the way God created our bodies to
Exactly.
work.
Yep.
When we're cutting ourselves open to deliver our babies and pushing on our stomachs and hooking ourselves up to a ton of drugs, there's no way that that's safer. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I understand it's necessary or
Yes.
helpful in some situations, and in some births it can be safer to help
Yes.
that we need assistance. But
Mm-hmm.
for an low risk mom with no medical needs, the safest birth is a natural birth.
I agree.
And there's no one that, like, statistically, like, if you, I just don't, you can't argue with that.
I know, right? Yeah, I agree.
Well, good for you for being the example and showing that you can be, and you sound so confident in it. It was just like, okay, it doesn't matter what you think, because I think a lot of women struggle with that judgment of others for their own birth choices, whether that's choosing to birth naturally or at home. And there's a lot of guilt and shame in the mom community.
I do agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Which is very unfortunate, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's very heartbreaking. Like I think I said it earlier that I think we as women, it's a basic right to have a birth that we want,
Yes.
that we deserve,
Yes.
you know? But the fact that we don't get that and we have to like pay for it or, some pay for the birth that we want or something like that, I just don't think that's fair. Like
Yeah.
birth is one of the most natural things for our bodies to do, and the fact that we are so limited and we have to go through all these obstacles to do it, I think it's just very, very, very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Especially and it's in the more developed worlds, it's like this,
Yes.
you know?
It's true. It's true. It's almost like the technology and all of these
Mm-hmm.
advancements, like, birth doesn't change. We've birthed the
Mm-hmm.
same way that we've always birthed for hundreds, thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how many medical advancements you have, it's almost like it takes us further away from the natural
Mm-hmm.
path,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't improve birth. You
Mm-hmm.
can make it safer in some situations with medical advancements,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And in third world countries, having those advancements and the option of a cesarean does improve maternal fetal outcomes. But there's a tipping point, I believe, in a society where too many medical advancements, too much intervention actually reduces the birth outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that statistically. And so I totally agree with you that
Mm-hmm.
even in the most medically advanced countries doesn't mean that birth is safer
Mm-hmm.
or that mom and baby have better outcomes, or
Mm-hmm.
even the like factors that we can't necessarily test for, like the maternal mental health, like
Mm-hmm.
birth satisfaction, the bonding between mom and baby. Those are harder to like quantify, but
Mm-hmm.
yet mothers who experience unmedicated birth and who are empowered to make decisions in their care have better experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I
So
totally
I mean,
agree.
you're just setting an example in South Korea for other moms. What
But
tell us quick?
yeah,
Go
there's
on.
so many moms who do it too. I'm just a very small percentage, but there's a lot of us who did have a beautiful natural birth. And I'm thankful that I have this option,
Yeah.
where it might not be available in other developed countries, but I'm glad I have this option. And then with my second, it was past her due date. I'm very active, so I was just working out all the time, getting my body ready. And then, so the day that she was born, like I had a busy day. I went to the gym, I went to the playground with my toddler, I cooked dinner, and I was like, well, I think she's gonna come at like 41 weeks, like maybe even 42, who knows? But my doctor was like, if she actually was scheduled me for induction at 40 plus 5,
Mm.
which I thought was too soon. So I was actually going to, my husband and I were talking about, well, I'm not gonna show up. Which they would have thought I was absolutely insane because, like, Korean culture, everyone follows the rules. Like, no one
Mm.
goes outside of the ruals. So it can be it's very good for the
You're a
government, maybe. But
rebel.
yeah, I am a rebel for sure. So I was like, I'm not gonna show up.
You're just a standard home birther, girl. Boss race the rules.
Yeah, seriously. Oh, so I was like, I'm not gonna show up. And then it was 40 plus 2 days, and around like 12:30, 12:45, I started having cramps, and I was like, these feel stronger than Braxton Hicks.
Mm.
I think labor's starting. I think now I kind of know what it feels like. And my body's just started naturally clearing me out. I went to the bathroom like 8 times. My husband's like texting my midwife, she's going to the bathroom again, you know? And my midwife, since she was same midwife as my first, so she was like, why don't you guys start heading to the center? Like, let's get ready. Um, but this time around, if I was more vocal with my first, I wasn't with my second. I was very quiet with my second. I was like in the moment, just like really, what I really regretted about my first is that I was so tense and I really tried to relax, but I kept wanting to curl up.
Mm-hmm.
And I would come back and curl up. So my goal for my second was really just embrace the waves. Like, let it come, like really just let it come and like welcome it. Cause I forget if it was on your podcast or someone else's, but somebody else was like, some mom said she welcomed the waves, and that
Yeah.
really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Welcome the waves, call it, come crashing on my body, like welcome it. So I was really quiet, which kind of freaked my husband out. So um, on the way there, I was absolutely silent. And I was like breathing, and I was just like embracing the waves. And that made my husband nervous. So he was speeding. I live an hour away from the birth center. We got there in like 35 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. He was like, if we get any tickets, we have a good enough reason. So like,
They'll
we're good. Yeah. So we got there. Yeah. We got there at 2. Yes, 2. And once I got there, I was 7 centimeters dilated. And they do the cervical checks. And I know some moms don't like that. But again, like I said, it's a hybrid birth center. It's not as natural as I would like, but that's a requirement, or that's what they like. You ask for
to know where you're at some point. They're not bad.
Yeah. So I wanted one. So, but for both births, I only have one. because I birthed so quickly, I guess. Initial one, that's it. And then
That's great.
yeah. And then so I got there, she's like, you're 7 centimeters dilated. And I was like, all right. And she was like, but the baby's kind of like not, she's kind of like angled sunny side up, but not fully. If we can get her to rotate a little bit more to be in the best position, that'll be the best. So my husband started doing all these hip shakes and all these things and all these different moves. And within 10 minutes, she was in position. Thankfully. Yeah. It was crazy. Yeah. We were like,
it's the benefit of having a husband who is well trained for birth support.
And then my water broke.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this baby just came in position, clicks in, water breaks.
Yep. So we got there at 2 and she was out by 3:11.
Wow. And were you pushing for as long with her?
No, I started pushing around 2:45, I think. When I looked at the clock, it was like 12:45 and she was out by 3:11.
I'm impressed you even know the times. Like most of the
like very good.
Yeah, you have very good memory.
I do.
You know the time stamps and everything.
Yeah, my husband sometimes calls me a genius.
I know, I asked for, but they're like, I don't know. I have no, it could have been 5 minutes, could have been 2 hours. I can't remember. It's all a blur.
Yeah, so it was nice. And then I was in the water and I had my water birth. I really wanted a water birth. So I had my water birth.
And you had her in the water?
Oh. And I felt her coming with the episiotomy, like it was like a weird sensation. But this time, like I really did, like I embraced every feeling. And and my husband like kept, because I told him, I was like, okay, when I do this, you gotta like touch it.
Your forehead wrinkles?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I can relax. And I read that we tend to do this when we push. So he would
clench your fist.
Yeah, clench her fist. So he would like kind of like massage my hand out. So I would like relax. So he did all these things to help me relax. I think that helped so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can let my body open up. And I truly felt her. I felt her descending. I felt my hips opening up. That's when I know I'm in transition because I felt it with my first two. I was like, oh, she's coming. Wow. And then when I felt that, I knew she was coming because the doctor last time only came in to really catch the baby and my doctor came in. And I was like, oh, she's going to be here soon. That's how I knew. And they like set out the table, the bed and all that stuff for me to move to. So I was like, okay, she's coming real soon.
But did you have her in the pool or
in the pool? Yeah.
In the pool, and they let that. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I actually we've vlogged the whole thing, and we watched it the other day, and I'm just completely silent.
Wow.
I'm just, and then you hear, oh, she's coming out. Oh, she's out. Here, I'm just silent. And there were times where I did go back and forth with like hums, low hums, but I'm just. In the moment, just pushing her out.
Wow.
And afterwards, I looked at my husband. I was like, if I can have a birth like this every time, I'll have 10 babies.
Welcome to the world of natural birth. Yeah. And it's like, oh, I'm addicted now. I could have more babies. I could do this again.
I call it a birth fever.
Yes.
Yeah.
I call it a birth fever. It's like you caught the bug. We call it the birth world. Like you got the birth bug. Now you're addicted for life.
Yeah, I truly am. It's like people get baby fever. I have birth fever. If I could give birth, like I don't truly enjoy the newborn stage. I find it very difficult, but I love the toddler stage. If I can give birth and they're just already toddlers, like that would be awesome.
But just don't want to give birth to a toddler. That would.
Yeah, I do. You're going, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. It's just remarkable to me that, like, no matter where we are in the world, no matter what ethnicity you are, whether you're Korean, American, African, like, our bodies work the same way as women. Our bodies are designed to expand and open. I love your description of the feeling and the sensation of, like, knowing that you're in transition, feeling your hips expand, and just that intuitive knowledge of, like, oh, my body's working. I don't have to be afraid of this. I don't have to, like, think something's wrong and be rescued from this experience. It's like everything is working the way it should. And no matter where you are in the world and what you've been told and what your body structure or, your makeup is, like our bodies all work. Birth works the same all around the world for thousands of years. and birth works.
Yes, I totally agree. And I've said it like many times, but I just think it's so unfortunate that women don't know this now. And
Well,
they
you're
think like,
helping spread the word, so
I
thank
hope so.
you.
Because I think my friends back home think I'm some like hippie birthing mom.
You have to be willing to be a
Yeah.
hippie birthing mom
Yeah.
to do it the way God designed it. Unfortunately, like it
Mhm.
shouldn't be that we're the crazy ones. We're just
Mhm.
doing it the way it's actually like designed for.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I said, if I could see blood, I would totally be a doula.
But thankfully, usually there's not too much blood in a natural birth. Sometimes there is, I
Yeah.
never know. But
Yeah.
I had a friend who said that, and she was like, she couldn't handle the sight of blood, she would get nauseous and pass out. And she actually called her to be a nurse. And she actually overcame that fear in order to be a nurse. How crazy is that?
That's
So
awesome. Now I'm inspired.
there's hope for you, Cindy. I might talk to you a year from now. You'll be in my doula training program, and you'll be a doula.
Maybe. I'm not kidding.
You
I
can
really,
support women in South Korea.
yeah, I could. I know that they do need more, like, I do think they need more
Doulas.
bilingual
Oh yeah.
doulas here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well,
I think that everyone should get a doula or a midwife, like during their birth process.
I agree. We all need support.
Hmm.
It's so wonderful. What would you say to any moms who want to have a unmedicated birth and might be a little scared, might feel pressured from people around them to go against the grain? What
Hmm.
would you say to them?
I think it's okay to be scared because I was scared too, even though I had this mindset, because it's something we've never done before, you
Yeah.
know? And it's something, it's like, it's the unknown, and the things that we do know about it is terrifying. So I think it's totally normal to be scared. But when it actually happens, to truly put your faith in God, because I felt God's presence in both my births. It was very spiritual for me. And my children were welcomed into this world with prayer and worship.
Mm.
And to really put your faith in God and trust your body that you can do it. I used to like tell myself all these things that I'm a super mom, I'm a super woman, I have super strength, like all these things, words of affirmation,
Yeah.
they work. So really
It's all a mental battleground.
it is. It's
Yeah.
a mental it's a mental process. It's like running a marathon. Like
Yes.
marathons, I ran one, and I'll marathons, I'll give birth before I run a marathon. But it was all mental.
There. I have
Yeah.
nothing to do there.
Oh, ugh, I don't know what I thought that was a trendy thing to do, so I did it, and I don't know what I was thinking. Never following the trend ever again. But yeah, I think it's totally normal to be scared. Embrace your emotions. Have a amazing support team. Make sure you have a husband who knows all your favorite snacks and drinks to give you during labor, and he says all the right things. My husband and I had a shared notes, and I had all the words of affirmation on there. So he knew exactly what to say.
Smart.
Yes. And we shared a Spotify playlist. So we added in music. So we had our own birth playlist, and so everything was together. It wasn't just me
Yes.
prepping everything. It was together.
Yeah.
I think that was also another big aspect of why I had such positive births, because I felt so supported by my husband, and we were in it together as a team.
Yeah.
So
That's
trust your body,
amazing.
trust in God, trust your husband.
Train your husband.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why I created a mini course just for husbands, because
Mhm.
I realize husbands are just as scared as women are going into labor, because they don't know what to do. And if no one's shared with them, here's what your role is in birth. Here's what I need from you. Here's what you can do. Here's the role you can fulfill, and how to practically do some of those things like the hip squeeze and rebozo sifting that you described. Like I put all of that in the birth partner boot camp mini course that's like 4 hours or less, just to help partners have like an idea of what they can do, because there's so much they can do to help. Like,
Mhm.
to your testimony, like your husband really stepped up. Like, he
Mhm.
knew what you needed. He had the playlist, the affirmations, the hip squeezes. He helped you get in and out of
Mhm.
positions. Like, that
Mhm.
goes so far. And
Mhm.
we'll put that link down below. And I also will include, if it's okay with you, your link to your vlog that you shared, that you documented your second birth. I would love to include that in the show notes too. So
Right.
thank you so much,
Yes.
Cindy, for your encouragement for women who are stepping into this maybe for the first time and feeling a little scared or nervous, and just just your wisdom and faith in the birth process, and sharing your incredible journey of birthing in South Korea. What an honor to hear. And I bless you, and yeah, we wish you the best, and we'll talk to you guys and see you next week.
Thank you so much for having me.